Hello and welcome to another episode of the Rotoworld Baseball Show. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined by my co-host, Scott Pianowski. The day before July 4th, we're into the holiday season. How you feeling, Scott?
Feeling good. You had a full slate of night baseball tonight, and then we got baseball basically wall-to-wall on the holiday. Baseball sometimes gets the holidays wrong. I don't think Memorial Day had a full slate, but they did not screw up the 4th of July. And what's more American than watching some baseball on Independence Day? And also, George Steinbrenner was born on the 4th of July, so it kind of makes sense, right?
I didn't know that. I didn't know that trivia stat, but that is nice to know. I mean, I think this is like why we saw the really light Monday slate, right? Everybody was like, "Oh, there's only 3 games on Monday." Why? Well, because usually Thursday is the light day, and they wanted to make sure we got baseball on the holiday. So, kudos to MLB. I will try to watch some baseball while my son is home because there's no daycare on Thursday, but we'll figure it out. July also means MLB trades. We know we have the deadline at the end of the month, and we are going to start talking about some of those players, players who could be moved. But we had a trade today. The Tampa Bay Rays sending Aaron Civale, who they acquired for Kyle Manzardo at the deadline last year. They've traded Aaron Civale now to the Brewers for 20-year-old shortstop Gregory Barrios, who is the 21st ranked prospect for the Brewers, currently at high A. I'm curious, we got to start with the Civale of this all. Does this impact your feelings on Civale at all for the remainder of the year? I mean, he has not been pitching particularly well. You know, I know we like to think that the Rays are able to, save or, quote unquote, raise some pitchers. But he has a 5.07 ERA in 87 innings with a 138 whip, 22.2% strikeout rate, just a 10.3% swinging strike rate. Can you see yourself being interested in Civale at all?
Probably not. I mean, the only good thing for Civale is being traded to a better team. It's just so weird to see the Rays not in contention. Obviously, Milwaukee has been in control of that NL Central for most of the season, but so the Civale trade did not work out for Tampa Bay. His ERA was over 5 last year. It's over 5 this year. He closes his Tampa Bay career with 27 starts, a 5.17 ERA. And even if you want to say, well, he's pitching a little bit better than that, I mean, his FIP is 4.33. That's not usable in a fantasy league either. So it's, he was better in Cleveland. He got worse in Tampa Bay for whatever reason. The only thing I think you're gaining is just the better win equity tied to a Milwaukee team that's playing better than Tampa Bay. But I need better ratios. I need a guy who's going to pitch better. Maybe he'll pick up some cheap wins, and you never know. I mean, it changes scenery. I don't know. Maybe something will spark in Civale, but he's been off my radar for a while.
Yeah. I mean, here's the interesting thing for me. I've never been a huge Aaron Civale fan for fantasy purposes. What I think is interesting is Civale throws 7 pitches. We saw the Rays try to change his pitch mix to get more swing and miss. He has never been a guy who missed many bats. The Rays took his slider. They tried to make it more of a sweeper, kind of like what they did with Zach Eflin. They tried to, up Civale's value by making him more of a strikeout pitcher. What are the Brewers doing right now? They're taking contact-oriented pitchers and saying, throw all of your stuff basically down the middle of the plate, let it move in its various directions, and just let the hitters struggle to find the barrel. What's Tobias Myers doing? Throwing his pitches down the middle of the plate, his fastball, his cutter, his changeup. Colin Ray is doing the same thing. We're pounding the strike zone with pitches that can look similar. They can tunnel well. They can, they come out of the hand the same direction. Maybe they approach the hitter in the same way. We don't have these like big humping curveballs and things like that. And, we just kind of like, we don't worry about swings and misses. We worry about inducing weak contact. And so there is an argument that approach might just be better for Civale, that like, hey, forget about swings and misses. That's not you. Like, let's turn you into a better version, a souped up version of Tobias Myers, right? I mean, I think we can agree that Aaron Civale as a pitcher has better raw stuff than Tobias Myers. Tobias Myers was designated for assignment by 4 teams for a reason, and that's not a knock against him, but like Civale has some decent pitches. he's just been a very low ceiling pitcher. But there's no reason they couldn't turn Civale into a slightly better version of Tobias Myers. But I don't think they're getting like some major fantasy ace here. I think he's still a streamer. He just might be slightly more reliable with a different pitching philosophy.
And that ties into one other really important thing about Milwaukee. Whatever, and I realize defensive metrics, people have different opinions on those. I think they're continuing to get better and more trustable, more credible all the time. Whatever your defensive metric is, the Milwaukee Brewers are probably first in it. If it's outs above average, if it's the Statcast fielding run value, if it's just straight out defensive WAR, if it's UZR/150, Milwaukee first in all of those things. Bryce Terang has been a breakout player for fantasy. He's one of the best defenders at second base. They have good defenders all over the field. So if you're going to live with a pitch to contact model, this is the type of defense. And it's one of these things where it's like, I care about defense on the extremes. I want to know what teams are really, really good, what teams are really, really bad. We've seen like Hunter Green. I know Posnanski was talking about this a few days ago, how his expected ERA is so much lower than his actual because the Reds have one of the worst defenses in baseball by the metrics. And Eric, I know you're going to spit this out right away. What team metrically is the worst defensive team in baseball right now?
Well, it's interesting because like from our fandom, you want to say the Red Sox because of just how people view the Red Sox. But that's a really good question.
Don't overthink it, Eric.
Is it not the White Sox?
White Sox are really bad. It's Boston is clearly the worst.
It is Boston. Okay.
Miami, Chicago, the White Sox, the Angels, Oakland, some of the other bad defensive teams. On the plus side of this, Milwaukee, Arizona, the Royals, San Diego, and Texas are your 5 best defensive teams.
Yeah. Interesting. Also, Brewers rotation note: DL Hall is close to returning. This seems to make the Brewers rotation full, but that's including Dallas Keuchel, including Colin Ray, who's pitching well. DL Hall recovering from the knee injury, velocity is back up, looking pretty good at AAA. They won't rush him, but it feels like for DL Hall to get back in the rotation, they need to either decide to give up on Dallas Keuchel, which isn't theoretically impossible. They just got him, or move Tobias Myers or Colin Ray out of the rotation. It just means that I don't think there's like an imminent move for DL Hall, but it does mean there still is the possibility. The big thing here is what it does for the Rays rotation, which is with Aaron Civale out of the rotation, we may finally have a spot for Shane Baz, who has been heating up at AAA. He has been crushing at AAA right now. At the start of the season, the Rays said they kind of wanted him to come back in July. We know he's coming back off Tommy John surgery. He wasn't going to get a full season in. They scratched Shane Baz from his start last night in AAA, and what the beat reporters were saying was that there was projected rain in the forecast Wednesday and Thursday for Tampa, so they were assuming there might be a doubleheader, so they were going to call Baz up for one of the doubleheaders. Well, now they have a spot in the rotation, and Baz was scratched from his start on Monday, so he's ready to go. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this is a one-for-one swap for the Rays. They moved Shane Baz in the rotation. He's like 56% rostered in Yahoo formats. If you didn't scoop him before, you should scoop him now, because this is a young pitcher with tremendous upside who I think is in the rotation for the rest of the season.
You talked about the trend. You're probably following what he's doing in AAA closer than I am, because I look at the totality of his 10 starts and the numbers are not pretty. The ERA is over 4. The whip is 1.576. He said it's a gigantic walk problem. He's walking 5.3 batters per 9, although there's been plenty of swing and miss. He's getting plenty of strikeouts. Have the recent turns been a lot better than that?
Yeah, much better. So early on, the command was not great on the off-speed pitches. He was going really like fastball heavy. But in his last start in AAA, he went over 5 innings of work. He gave up 2 runs on 6 hits. He struck out 7. In the start before that, he struck out 6 over just 3 scoreless innings. Was averaging 95 with the fastball. 96.5 with the fastball. I'm looking up like are blurbs for him. But Baz has been looking really good with the off-speed pitches mixed in as well. The fastball velocity has gotten much better. If we just like talk through this as we're going through right now, but his game logs, you could go to like AAA game logs in June. He has a 1.57 ERA over 5 starts. It's just looking much better for Shane Baz.
I mean, he checks 2 very important boxes.
35 strikeouts in 23 innings.
Mm-hmm. I mean, two boxes you want to check for any prospect. One, was he a rated prospect? And, I'm looking at his prospect ratings. At one point, he was number 8 prospect Baseball America 2 years ago. He was number 8 prospect for Baseball Prospectus that year. He was the number 12 prospect for MLB.com. And is he going to get strikeout? Even if Baz gets hit, even if he's not that effective, he's going to be somebody who strikes out better than a batter per inning. He's got that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Just as a note, the prospect that the Rays got, Gregory Barrios, just turned 20 years old. He's a middle infielder who's hitting 317 at high A. Free swinger, but lots of contact. Just a 9.5% strikeout rate. He is a, quote, fast and slick fielding defensive shortstop with great contact skills, which just seems like a Rays prospect that they would have in the minor leagues. He's a long way away. There's nothing fantasy relevant here, but it is just something to consider. And this is a precursor that we could see more Rays pitchers on the move. They've been talking about if Zach Eflin gets dealt, Zach Littell also on the trade market. The Rays look like they're going to be sellers right now. With Jeffrey Springs also nearing a return, I had said that Jeffrey Springs may return to like a multi-inning relief role, but maybe they decide we're going to move Zach Eflin for prospects. We're going to move Zach Littell for prospects, and they know they can slot Jeffrey Springs back into the rotation too. So it's an interesting time for the Rays, and they are certainly a team to be watching as we get into the trade deadline. We don't have full news yet, but Royce Lewis left Tuesday's game with a groin injury. He said he was worried. The Twins beat writers on Twitter qualified that his worry is not like that it's a long-term injury, but his worry is that he's going to wind up on the IL because the Twins are being cautious with him and because of his history of injuries. And so we know he's getting imaging today, Wednesday. We haven't heard anything yet, but I think we have to assume a brief IL stint is in the cards for Royce Lewis. His batting average has not been great of late. The power has been good, and he's just an exciting young player, and it's a shame to see him hurt again. And so we'll cross our fingers it's not a long absence, and this might open up a possibility for Brooks Lee to come up for the Twins. Brooks Lee is a shortstop by trade who was playing second base for the Twins because they were expecting that he was going to try to, come up and take that space with Carlos Correa still there. But he got off to a slow start with a back injury, but is hitting 333 in 19 games at AAA with 6 home runs, 19 runs scored, 18 RBIs. That type of power isn't going to carry over for Brooks Lee. He's not going to run a 30% homer to fly ball rate at the big league level, but the contact skills are real, and he is a prospect of note. And if he gets an opportunity, he could stick even if Royce Lewis comes back because the Twins could slide him to second base. So we don't know that that's the corresponding move, but it's just an interesting name to keep in mind. And if you have the ability to stash somebody in your league, it might be time to stash Brooks Lee.
It's just such a shame. We've seen 94 Major League Baseball games from Royce Lewis over 3 seasons, and he's hit 27 home runs. He's 303, 361, 584 lifetime slash. I mean, this guy, those are MVP candidate numbers if he can stay healthy. Obviously, he was the first overall pick. They have a lot of these guys, right? Correa was the first overall pick. He's on the Twins. He's having a nice bounce back season. Byron Buxton, who was the prospect in baseball when he was coming up, he's finally having a healthy season, made a heck of a catch in center field on Tuesday night, and he's been really productive of late. But Lewis, for whatever reason, he's been really star-crossed. Still just 25. So, sometimes guys, the second half of their careers, they're healthier. George Brett, Paul Molitor, guys like that, they couldn't stay healthy in their 20s, and they were better in their 30s at times, and they end up being Hall of Famers. In the case of Molitor, Brett probably always was on a Hall of Fame trajectory. Molitor might have been a little bit more surprising. But unfortunately, when you have a player like Lewis and anything happens, I know the MRI is going to happen Wednesday. We'll have more information, but you just have to assume the worst based on the trajectory he's had the last 3 seasons. But what a player when he's healthy, man. I just want to see – Buxton's gone over 100 games once in his career. Hopefully he'll do it this year for the second time. That's the only reason he's on one Gold Glove is because he's missed so much time. And then for a while he was just a DH only player. Correa at one point was seen as a superstar, and then there was that off season where nobody wanted to sign him because he kept failing physicals, and I guess everybody wanted to sign him, but they couldn't honor the contract. So it's a weird composition of this Twins roster. But thankfully they have depth. We talked about Jose Miranda on Monday, what a great season he's had. And, he slots at third base. I guess his leash is a little bit deeper now. People probably trusted him anyway. I actually picked him up in the league this week, which surprised me. But as a Royce Lewis manager, if you told me I was still going to get another 50 or 60 games from him the rest of the season, I would probably take it.
Yeah, yes, you would take it. I think we have to hope that we get that. And, it's it is unfortunate. He's like a top 60 player over the last month, and he hasn't even played fully over the last month. And that's the type of upside he has. It may just be a star-crossed type of thing. And we hope it's not the case, but we'll wait word and see. We did get word that Alek Thomas has returned for the Diamondbacks. Alek Thomas, another guy who was a prospect of note coming up. He's just 24 years old. He was always going to be a batting average first player at the big league level. That has not come to fruition. He's hit just 230 as a big league hitter, even though, in AAA before coming up, he was spiking like a 348 batting average in 2023, a 322 batting average in 2022. He had spent a lot of time on his swing in the offseason. Are you picking up Alek Thomas in any leagues right now, given that he's 24 and was a prospect of note, or have the MLB struggles just been a little too much for you at this point?
He's borderline. He's more of a reactive pick for me than a proactive pick. The one thing I have done tied to him is I think it's this nice little Jake McCarthy story we had going on. I think that's probably just about expired. He's clearly a fourth outfielder now. And you had to play the platoon game with him. He was never playing full weeks because they would sit him against left-handed pitching. And he's a good base stealer. He's not like he's not like a 50 base stealer or anything like that. He's a little bit of power. So I've been dropping McCarthy in recent days where I had him, but Thomas will have to hit his way onto my roster.
Yeah, and the corresponding move there, Blaze Alexander, who was fantasy relevant for a little bit, was sent down to AAA. The Diamondbacks are also putting Jordan Montgomery on the IL with left knee inflammation. I just recorded our fantasy baseball ad drop today, which is a YouTube show, and you can record or you can find it on NBC Sports as well. Prior to the injury, I was suggesting dropping Jordan Montgomery. I firmly believe in dropping Jordan Montgomery now that he's injured, even if he's not on the IL for a long period of time. But I'm curious if you co-sign the idea that, like, Jordan Montgomery, the way he's pitching right now, and given what his fantasy upside was anyway, is probably not worth holding in most formats while he's also dealing with an injury.
Totally agree. And what a difficult season for the two guys who signed so late, right? Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery. Has the pitching market changed? People don't want to give the long-term contracts to these guys. And I don't know that their struggles and their injuries is tied to the cadence of their offseason. Maybe, and obviously they were working out before they signed, but I don't know how much just being away from a spring training, if that had anything to do with anything. But yeah, the Jordan Montgomery season for fantasy relevance, that book is closed, and I'm not exactly holding my breath for Blake Snell either. And I say that with no joy. It's just that the market has changed. People will pony up long-term contracts for middle of the career hitters. I think teams are getting really judicious with the pitchers they pay for now.
Yeah. And listen, we talked at the beginning of the season that the Jordan Montgomery season last year was always going to regress based on what the underlying metrics suggested. He doesn't miss a lot of bats. The strikeout rate's always been low. He will outperform his ratios, but a lot of that also had to do with defense, right? Like there were some years where he had a really good St. Louis Cardinals defense behind him. The Yankees defense for stretches that was behind him was pretty solid. But he's somebody who in my mind is a high threes ERA, like 3.7, 3.8 ERA pitcher who won't miss a lot of bats. And that's fine, but that's kind of a streamer or a high-end streamer. And so when he's running as poorly as he is right now, I don't think he warrants being held on your roster. maybe you wind up picking him up later on in the season. I won't rule that out, but I think he's going to be kind of matchup dependent. And like, I'm not starting him against the Phillies and the Braves and the Dodgers and teams like that, who I think can really kind of get to him. And so I'm moving off of Jordan Montgomery. There's a rumor that Arizona will be calling up Christian Mena, who came over in the trade for Dominic Canzone in the offseason. He is the 11th ranked prospect in Arizona's system. He has a 4.90 ERA right now in AAA Reno. Just understand that like AAA Reno is a hitter-friendly park, right? And so those stats are a little bit inflated. He's just 21 years old. There is some interest in Mena, who has a five pitch mix with some good secondaries, a curveball, and a slider that grade out pretty well. Not a finished product, but as somebody of interest that like I would go out and make sure you watch this start. And in deeper formats, you may find him streaming worthy if he gets a spot in this rotation. But young kid might not be up for a long stretch of time.
How did he wind up from the White Sox organization to the Arizona? I'm trying to remember what there was
the Dominic Fletcher trade.
Okay.
This offseason.
Yeah, the off discussed Dominic Fletcher trade. There you go.
Yes, the off discussed Fletcher trade. Jordan Montgomery on the IL. Dean Kremer coming off the IL. He will come off the IL and face the Mariners tonight. Are you A, interested in adding Dean Kremer in any leagues, and are you B, willing to start him right off the IL against the Mariners?
Because the Mariners, I mean, you think anybody off the IL would probably be on a low pitch cap, but he might get the 5 innings. I will throw anybody against the Mariners. They're striking out so much, and the park is so friendly. Nobody's afraid to pound the zone in Seattle because the park's going to hide some of your mistakes, and the Mariners are going to miss a lot of them. I mean, it's amazing that Seattle's been as good as they have been this season with such a mediocre offense. Of course, it speaks to the depth of their pitching staff. But yes, Kremer actually in some leagues I was using IL spots for him, not in part because maybe some of those teams weren't as injury ravaged. Because if you get multiple guys who are hurt, and you have to start making choices. He's the player who's not good enough to survive that type of choice, but we've always liked him because the home park he has fits him perfectly because that left field adjustment, it's going to hide a lot of his mistakes. I think Dean Kremer, I've been into Dean Kremer more as a fantasy asset than I should be, but I still think he could be a middle of rotation pitcher for a fantasy contender.
I fully agree with you. And he made some changes at the end of last season, which added a little bit more strikeout upside. And he was pitching really well this year. I know this is like selective, right? But we know that he went on the IL with an arm injury. We know that his worst 2 starts of the year were his last 2 starts. It is not without question to believe that the arm injury that landed him on the IL was impacting his performance in the starts before going on the IL. So if you just humor me and say, okay, we'll take out those last 2 starts, which he may have been pitching through an injury with, his first 7 starts of the season, he had a 3.57 ERA with a 0.97 whip, had allowed a 188 batting average against, a 16.3% strikeout minus walk ratio, but a 23.1% strikeout rate, which would have been a career high for him. That is a very usable pitcher in 15-team leagues, a pitcher you really want to stream in 12-team leagues when he has a good matchup. I'm excited to get him back on my AL tout team. I'm happy to roster Dean Kremer in 15-team leagues and stream him in 12s. I think this marks the end for either Cole Irvin or Albert Suarez. We don't know yet for sure, so that's something to keep an eye on. You were playing matchups with those guys anyway, so it's not a huge loss. Last thing before we get to quick hitters, Tim Anderson was designated for assignment by the Marlins. Xavier Edwards was called up. This might not be a fantasy relevant question because I don't know how many people were rostering Tim Anderson, but it's a pretty wild and quick decline for somebody that we thought was like a 290, 300 hitter every year with 15 stolen base upside. Do we think we're just done with Tim Anderson in fantasy?
I don't think there's any doubt that we're done. But I just want to throw 2 more things out at Kremer. He's only 23% rostered in Yahoo, I want to say. So if you want to scout his start and make a decision on him in Yahoo leagues, you may be able to do that. But Anderson was one of my favorite players for years because he didn't walk, but he would hit 300 every year. He won a batting title. And there's a 4-year run where he hit 335, 322, 309, 301. And I would use him to underscore that, okay, he has an approach that you wouldn't teach most guys, but it works for him. Leave it alone. He's got some power. He's got some speed. He was a fun player to watch. There's a certain joie de vivre with Anderson. He was the leader of an up-and-coming White Sox team. And then I don't want to put it all on him. A lot of things have gone wrong with the White Sox, injuries, some bad decisions, some bad contracts. But it seems like right in the middle of everything collapsing was Tim Anderson's career collapsing. And it's just so strange when somebody loses it at this young of an age. I mean, it's his age 31 season. I could see a little bit of decline hissing into the balloon, but he shouldn't be done as a major league player. But sadly, I think he's done as a major league player. He would need to go on an absolute tear. I mean, we're talking like 4 or 5 weeks before I'd even think. I mean, maybe somebody picks him up and he has a dead cat bounce here or there. I think he might have had like a 2-week relevant stretch with Miami, but he's just looked like a player who just can't compete at the major league level anymore. And I say that with sadness because, again, batting title guy, he made a couple of all-star teams. He was MVP ballot guy in 2020 in the strike season in the pandemic season. So we had a lot of fun with Tim Anderson in his 20s, but it just seems like it's over now.
Which is, I agree with you that it is sad. What's not sad, we have confirmation just 7 minutes ago, tweeted out, Shane Baz will join the Rays.
There you go.
To take Aaron Civale's spot in the rotation. It is official. Make that move if you can in your fantasy leagues. A couple quick hitters to end this. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, who we talked about, was like really heating up at the plate. Unfortunate timing. He is going to the IL with a knee injury. They do not expect it to be a minimum stay. So we don't know the full timetable, but it'll be at least more than 2 weeks. That's more playing time for Ernie Clement, but possibly more playing time for Addison Barger. We'll see how that shakes out in Toronto. Kerry Carpenter experienced more back discomfort while ramping up his activities. So any hope that Kerry Carpenter might be coming back in the near future seems to be on hold. Casey Mize, the Tigers are pacing Casey Mize on the IL. It will be Kaiser Montero coming up to start. I know early in the season we were kind of banging the table, myself in particular, about Matt Manning, and we said Matt Manning would have a spot in this rotation at some point. It is not happening for Matt Manning right now. The Tigers are apparently revamping his delivery at AAA. He has a 5.68 ERA in 38 innings in 8 games in AAA. He's really struggled against left-handers in particular in between MLB and AAA action. Lefties are hitting 304 off of Manning with an 893 OPS. That is not good. And I have Matt Manning in reserves on my AL Tout War team. And I think I'm just going to move on because I just don't know that anything suggests he's going to be up at all this year, pitching meaningful innings. And then we talked about the fact that Christian Scott was likely going to debut for the Mets, or not debut, but come back up for the Mets. That's been confirmed. He is starting today for the Mets. So if you still have the opportunity to pick him up in any leagues, you should go ahead and do that.
Yeah, that's the big takeaway from all those quick hitters is that Christian Scott is somebody I'm certainly interested in. And I was pro IKF while I was healthy, but with this not expected to be a limited stay and hamstring, I had to cut him in a couple of leagues. And the problem with Matt Manning is even when he comes up, even when he pitches well, they treat him as like a 5-inning pitcher. I went to a game where I saw him remove with a no-hitter. I mean, they can't wait to get Matt Manning out of the game. So in a year where so little has gone right for the Tiger, Riley Green's been a breakout player, but Torkelson wasn't good at all. And obviously Javi Baez can't hit. And Mize is he looks like Roger Clemens, but he pitches like Jamie Moyer. It doesn't really make any sense to me. And even Kerry Carpenter, who was having a nice binge before he got hurt, he's a platoon guy. You have to work the schedule with him. Now he's had a setback. I thought this would be the year the Tigers would climb into that 81, 83, 84 win area. Unfortunately, there's been 3 other teams in that division who have been pretty good. Twins have outkicked their expectations. The Guardians have as well. The Royals are good. We know the White Sox are god awful, but I think when I thought the Tigers would take a half step up this season, they've actually taken maybe a full step back.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but I still have optimism for the future from them, especially given their pitching. We're going to take a quick break, hear from our sponsors, or do some advertising. But when we get back, just know that we are going to cover some of Scott and my favorite tools in terms of thinking of how we can identify players that should be rostered, picked up, traded for, guys who are trending in the right direction. We'll talk about what those tools are and how you can use them. Before we do that, NASCAR hits the streets of Chicago as the race to the playoffs heats up this summer. Don't miss the drama and the excitement in the Windy City this Sunday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC and Peacock. That is in NASCAR Chicago. Sunday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. So a lot of things come in during the year, like how do you identify who to pick up? And, Yahoo has and a lot of the fantasy platforms that have great ways to check, like, what are the stats for the last 14 days? What are the stats for the last 7? Who's the most added? Who's the most dropped? You can kind of just see, like, who's running hot over the regular period of time. Some other tools I really like, and I want to go over some players who pop on each of them, and we can just quickly mention if we're interested in trading for these guys or adding them, depending on their roster rates. I really like StatCast's rolling expected wOBA leaderboard. So the rolling leaderboards in general are leaderboards that take a rolling set of time, right, and give you the leaderboard over that set. So the StatCast leaderboards there's one for the last 50 plate appearances. There's one for the last 100. Over the last 50 plate appearances, who has improved their wOBA the most? Over the last 100, who has improved the most, or who has seen the biggest drop off? Now, why I like this, wOBA, which stands for weighted on base average. What it is it, instead of just like regular on base percentage, wOBA assigns a value to each method of reaching base. So depending on how impactful that method is in terms of scoring runs, it gets a different weight, right? So homers account for more, triples account for more, doubles account for more, singles less, hit by pitch less, etc. So that when you say what is somebody's wOBA, you're not just saying how often are they getting on base, but how often are they getting on base in ways that meaningfully can create runs, right? Guys who get on base with more triples or home runs will have higher wOBAs. Now, this is their rolling wOBA leaderboard is guys who have gained the most. So you might still have guys who have really good weighted on base percentages who aren't on here because they've been good, they are good. Mm-hmm. So it's not a matter of finding the best. It's finding the guys who are improving the most. Like, for example, the top guy on the list is Francisco Alvarez. Some of it is coming off an injury. Some of it is a hot streak, right? But he is, over the last 50 plate appearances, he has improved his wOBA, expected wOBA, the most of anybody in baseball. What I thought was interesting is that number 2 on there is Andres Gimenez. And Andres Gimenez is somebody that we've kind of been a little bit disappointed in this year, based on what his overall stat line is, what he's giving us for fantasy purposes, hitting 249, 5 home runs, 14 steals in 77 games. But StatCast is suggesting that he is improving his wOBA a lot over the last 50 plate appearances, which is interesting because he's coming off the worst month of the season for him. So what are you seeing here from Andres Gimenez? Anything that you feel like you're willing to buy in on, or is this expected wOBA metric from StatCast maybe leading us in the wrong direction?
No, I mean, I like stats like this that tell the trend of where a player is going. In the case of a player like Gimenez, tied to a good offense, I mean, he's been, I think he was a top 10 MVP guy a couple of years ago. Sometimes just a matter of a good player just waking up and getting back into his form. Nolan Jones is deeper on this list. A player who a lot of people are probably, what the heck's going on with this guy? Should I cut him? Stuff like that. I mean, Gimenez, especially it's encouraging to see after he had a really bad, that June where he hit 172. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people were like thinking about maybe dropping Gimenez, but I like that the trend is pointing upward, and I want to invest in this Cleveland offense. So it's, I know you have to put, with any stat like this, I want to have a why, even if it's not something we know for sure. I want to think that there's something, and I realize when you chase attribution, sometimes you can come up with false positives, but has there been a better approach at the plate? Is the walks going in the right direction? Are they making better contact? Have they shifted the order? Have they got rid of a leg kick? Something technical. I'm always looking for a why to go along with whatever the stats are telling me, especially stuff that's this granular. But yeah, I think it's definitely a good way to scout players, and it's the type of work that I like to do too.
Yeah, I will say over these last 50 plate appearances, it's a 209 batting average for Andres Gimenez with a 222 BABIP, which obviously suggests a little bit of bad luck. He does have an 8% barrel rate and a 46% hard hit rate over that span, over these last 50 plate appearances. Those are both up from his season-long average. Just a 12% strikeout rate and an 8% walk rate over this time. So you've got a guy who's making consistent contact, is barreling the ball more than he was in the past, more hard hit balls than he had in the past. Solid 19% live drive rate, possibly, pulling the ball a little bit too much, as a 60% pull rate over this span, which is way up from who he's been in his career, which may factor into the results. Maybe some of it is some rollover stuff or, not going with the pitch, but I see a guy improving on his overall contact metrics, not striking out a lot. A guy who's continuing to play every day. He has a 4.5% walk rate on the season, but over an 8% walk rate during this stretch. So getting on base a little bit more, potentially being a little bit more selective. We already know he's got 14 stolen bases in 77 games. So if he gets on more, he's just going to run more. So yeah, this intrigues me. And this is where, I would look at a lot of the underlying stats for Gimenez and not be super interested, but he is popping on this leaderboard, which had me even look into him in the first place. And that's when you're able to look at the walk rate changes. And that's when you're able to look at the barrel rate changes. And you can say, oh, maybe there's something, as you love to say, maybe there's something percolating here. Maybe something is coming under the surface that will lead to a little bit of a better month for Andres Gimenez in July, which we've already, we're working with a really small sample size, right? But we know that, the last few games, his last 2 or 3 games have been a little bit better than what we saw at the end of.
And even when he wasn't hitting it all in June, he still stole 5 bases,
Yeah.
So it wasn't like he was a complete zero for fantasy.
Yeah. Spencer Horwitz is another guy who pops on here. We have talked about Horwitz before. A guy who is hitting second every time when he's in the lineup for the Blue Jays, is starting to now play every day against righties, which is good. Really good plate discipline, great contact ability. I don't know what you're going to get in the way of power and speed, even though we did homer last night. But we've covered him. But you're interested in trying to get Horwitz if he's available in your leagues, or you can acquire him in a deal.
Yeah, I just feel like we've just been rinse, lather, repeat with Horwitz. He's been in your pieces. He's been in the waiver wire piece I wrote recently. Andy Behrens has talked about him multiple times. Anytime I see more walks and strikeouts, that's a sign of a good hitter. He was absolutely raking at AAA Buffalo, and he's continued to hit the big hurdle for him has been playing every day. And, maybe this IKF injury, just the way the dominoes fall, could help Horwitz mark his territory in the lineup. And I still think this team is going to trade some pieces, maybe not the biggest. We'll see if Bobachek gets traded now, or if that's something that happens in the offseason. It does seem like that's inevitable, that the trade's going to happen, just a matter of what the timing is. But I feel like Spencer Horwitz is the only reason people are holding off now, is because they're like, okay, I need a guy who plays every day, and I can't pick this guy up in my maybe a shallower format because he's not playing every day. But how can Toronto look at a guy with a 307, 442, 500 slash and say, nah, you're not good enough to be an everyday player? Of course he is. And there's going to be, the thing is, is he a 20 home run guy? No, but he's not powerless. He will steal an occasional base. He should be near the top of the lineup, which should be good for his run production stats. In anything from 12 team and up formats, mixed league, I think he's rosterable. And I think he's actually, what's going to happen is he'll play, I think, every day in the second half. The slash line will probably come down a little bit, but because he'll be playing every day, that will offset it. So maybe the rest of the way he's a 280, 350, like 470 guy. Yeah, I'll take that all day.
Yeah, I love that as well. Kyle Higashioka is another name on here. We've talked about him as well in the past, now that he's starting with Luis Camposano on the IL. he's always had pretty solid power. He's lifting the ball more this year, being a little more selective, swinging less outside of the zone. The called strike rate is a little high. I think he's probably a 230 hitter, which is what he's shown over the last few years with the Yankees. I don't think you're seeing like a breakout, but the power is real. And so Higashioka is interesting in 2-catcher leagues. I will say, like, Hunter Renfroe is somebody I picked up. He's on this leaderboard as well. He's somebody I picked up in some deeper formats, like some deeper NFBC formats this weekend. Over the last 54 plate appearances, he's hitting .313. Over that same stretch, he has just a 24% chase rate, 10% barrel rate, just a 6.3% swinging strike rate for Hunter Renfroe over that stretch, and an 85% contact rate. Those are huge for Renfroe, who is kind of like a power first guy. I don't know that that's going to keep up, but like, it wouldn't surprise me if Hunter Renfroe, went back to like what he was in Milwaukee 2 years ago, where he hit 250 and showed good power. Like, I don't think that he's the 210 hitter he showed at the beginning of this year. I think he's always shown that like he could hit 240, 250 with plus power. Kauffman Stadium will sap some of that power a little bit. But I think Hunter Renfroe is firmly in the mix in deep leagues if you need an outfielder, because he's going to play, pretty much every day. And he has the power to be useful without a batting average that I think will truly sink you.
Just quickly on Higashioka. I look at his profile. Why can't he be Cal Raleigh? Right? A few walks, the average is, it's going to hurt you, ding you a little bit, but there's enough power to offset that. The power is certainly spiked up this year. That Padres lineup, we'll see how quickly they can get Tatis back. But there's a lot of things working. We talked a lot about Merrill being a breakout player. It's been the breakout season for Jurickson Profar, who may win a batting title. I'm curious when everybody's healthy in San Diego who they think their best catcher is, because Higgy might be that guy.
Yeah, I think that I think he was cutting into Campusano's playing time before Campusano got hurt. And so I think a 50-50 split is seeming very likely to me when Campusano comes back. And it wouldn't surprise me if it swung like 60-40 in the other direction. I think Higashioka is on the 1-catcher league radar right now while he's hitting well. I would just caution people that like the batting average, I think, will drop. But the power, I think, is certainly real and has been. He's had really high barrel rates and hard hit rates for a while now. One of the other things I like to look at, it's a new feature this year. We've talked about it in the past, but I do like the Fangraphs player rater. I like that you can use sort by 5 by it's 5 by 5. You can sort by 15-team league or 12-team league, which is something that's really interesting depending on the formats that you're playing in. I like just looking to see who is playing really well of late in terms of like what their dollar value is in 5 by 5 leagues and whether they're guys who are on the waiver wire, whether they're guys who can be traded for. There's some guys that we've talked about who are top 75 players in the player rater over the last month. Harrison Bader, Jose Miranda, Zach Neto, Heimer Candelario. Like, these are guys we've been banging the drum for a little bit in the past. It's nice to see them pop on this as well. 2 White Sox I'm curious about your interest in. We've talked about Andrew Vaughn and what he's doing. He is another guy who is a top 75 player over the last 30 days. And then Paul DeJong as well has really, the power has picked up for Paul DeJong. The batting average, hasn't been electric, but it's been good enough that it's not really hurting you. Are you interested in either of these 2 guys who may be easy to kind of trade for or pick up off the wire in shower formats because everything is kind of tainted with the White Sox these days?
Yeah, I've been slow to accept Vaughn, who last couple of years it's like, okay, well, he's 3rd overall pick in this draft. He's a first baseman. Let's go. Where is it? And he was a league average hitter last year. He's a little bit below league average by OPS plus this year. And the power doesn't match up with the slugging percentage. He's just slugging 403. DeJong, I often joke about the Angels having a bunch of guys. He's still in baseball. The White Sox have some of those guys too, with Tommy Pham at the front of his lineup. Maybe they'll trade him during the deadline with DeJong. Remember, if you if you pick up any of these guys, you're getting tied to the worst offense in baseball, and that's a good tiebreaker against these players. And I also want to say, you mentioned the Fangraphs player rater, which is a very useful tool. Obviously, Fangraphs is one of the best sites in the fantasy industry. There's also a site I use called Baseball Monster that you can do player survey cuts any way you like it. One thing I really like about it is once I think you have to set up a profile to get this, but I'm not positive. I do have a profile on it. Is it will also give you Yahoo roster tags. So when you're going through it, you'll be like, oh, you'll see a player, and you'll be like, oh, okay, he's 13% rostered in Yahoo, or he's 27% rostered in Yahoo. And based on the flow of your league, what that number means. In a deeper league, you may need it to be lower. In a more shallow league, anything under 50%, which is usually our cutoff when we write articles like that, will be in play. So it's really good it has the positions tied to the Yahoo eligibility. It has the roster tags tied to the Yahoo eligibility. And you can literally pick any date you want. So you can go as deep or as shallow as you want. And even sometimes if I'm writing something as a year-end piece, if somebody took off in the second half and I want to say, okay, how fantasy relevant was he over this survey of time? You can just pick your survey and cut it up. And then you get, he was outfielder 7 for the second half of the year, whatever it is. So Monster's a site that I like. I have not been proactive with the White Sox offense. And if they bash the heck out of the ball, they party like it's 1977 the second half, I'm going to be the guy who does not benefit from that.
Yeah, I have begrudgingly picked up a few shares of Paul DeJong just because I needed shortstops. The power was there. I don't believe in the batting average. I mean, he's never been a guy who's run really high batting averages, but again, playing every day, we've seen him go through stretches in the past where he hits for legitimate power. So I think the power is real to an extent. And it reminds me of another guy on this list who popped on the Fangraphs player rater, who's Brandon Lowe. Over the last month, Brandon Lowe is the 56th ranked player in standard 5x5 formats. He's hitting 254 over that stretch with 6 home runs in 73 plate appearances. He has 16 RBIs. He has 14 runs. The Rays are also kind of playing him against lefties a little bit. Not all the time, but some. We've done this dance with Brandon Lowe before. I feel like the batting average is never a huge asset, but the power can be good. But the Rays are also kind of selling now. Where are you at on Brandon Lowe? Are you willing to roster him in a few places if you need power?
Yeah, I'm going to be slow on him too because he just doesn't play every day. I mean, I'm looking at the Tampa Bay daily lineups, and there's just a bunch of white space where, and also, man, why can't you be Lowe like everybody else? Why do you have to be Brandon Lowe? It drives me crazy. There's a lot of LOWEs in Major League Baseball right now, and they can't agree on a pronunciation. So let's try to lock that in, guys. But no, the big thing for me is that between the batting average risk, between the injuries he's dealt with the last few years, it just seems crazy that would he have a 39 home run season or something like that a couple of years ago? He looked like a rising star. I've given up the ghost on that player. And the next season when he was bad, I was patient all year. And so I admit that there's been a mark here. But the big thing for me is he doesn't play every day. And that for a player who's a borderline pickup for me, everyday playing time a lot of times is how I break that tie. And that's how I'm going to break the tie against Lowe.
Yeah, wow. I fully understand that as well. And then the last guy, I can't believe we're going to bring up on here, but he popped on this. He's the 150th ranked player over the last 30 days. And it's Rowdy Tellez. Now, Rowdy Tellez, I'm writing an article coming out tomorrow that talks about some custom leaderboards, which we'll get to later. But I looked up his stats over the last 73 plate appearances for Rowdy Tellez. He's hitting 338 with 3 home runs, 14 RBIs. He's striking out just 22% of the time with a 5.6% swinging strike rate and 11.5% barrel rate over that time. You know, the power and the counting stats aren't great because the Pirates lineup isn't great, but Rowdy Tellez has been on fantasy radars in the past. We know he can hit a little bit. He's hitting 338 over the last month. Is this somebody, if you're in a deeper format and you need a corner infield spot, that you're willing to gamble with Rowdy Tellez again?
It would have to be like a 15-teamer, and I'd have to be pretty desperate. His Savant page is still filled with sliders that are on the bad side of things, and the barrel rate is low. The hard hit rate is ordinary. I just think I close my eyes and I think of Rowdy Tellez is like, okay, when he makes contact, it should be pretty loud. I mean, he hit 35 home runs not that long ago, but this year he's not hitting the ball with any authority with those home runs to the recent trend notwithstanding. I realize too the Pittsburgh lineup is a tough watch. It's a tough investment. I wanted to believe O'Neal Cruz has not had a great season, and McCutchen I think is still probably a borderline Hall of Famer, but he's obviously on the back nine. Nick Gonzalez has had a drop off recently. Brian Hayes is always going to be one of those guys. We're always going to look for reasons why Brian Hayes is maybe a little bit better than he is, and I realize he's a great defender, and you did a great breakdown of him before the season, but. Bottom line, I want to stream against the Pirates. I don't want to pick up the Pirates.
Yep. Yes, that is sad, but I get it. I want to end with one pitcher who popped on this because it begs a larger question of like how you roster multi-inning pitchers. So Jose Urena, who we know has been fairly average as a starter, is the 38th ranked player. So not even just pitcher, like 38th ranked player. In Yahoo Standard 5x5 format over the last month. Part of that is in the amount of wins that he's been able to pick up 2 wins and 1 save since he moved into a multi-inning relief role for the Rangers. But since he moved into a multi-inning relief role for the Rangers, Jose Urena has not given up a single run. He has 11 1/3 innings over 4 games without giving up a run. He has gotten a 3-inning save. He's pitched. He's gotten a win. He's not striking out a lot of batters with just a 18.4% strikeout rate. But I'm curious where these type of multi-inning relievers on good teams who pop on player raters because they're in the mix for long saves, they're in the mix for wins. Like, do you tend to roster these type of players, or do you think the variance on them is so drastic within the course of the year that it's impossible to know who's going to be worth holding?
I actually love rostering this type of player when they're on good teams, when they're getting enough leverage work. That we're at a time where we've never seen wins filter in relief more than they do now. So they can be sneaky win sources, and sometimes they get an occasional save. The problem with Urena is he just doesn't have the strikeout numbers. I want these guys to be fire-breathing dragons. And we see it's so common for even a guy who doesn't strike out a lot of batters as a starter. A lot of times they go into any kind of a relief role and then their strikeout rate ticks up. But what's really unusual to me is that his strikeout rate has not been raised that much. He was striking out 6 batters per 9 as a starter. It's 6.5 as a reliever. The whip has gotten better. And the Rangers I still think I view them as a winning team. I think their record's a little bit below 500 right now, but I see no reason why they can't make a playoff run. If I saw more strikeouts, I'd be invested. Bruce Bochy is also a manager that I believe in as well. I want you to be looking for guys like this. There's a couple of codes he doesn't match up with, so I wouldn't pick up Urena. But this type of player is the type of player I'm often looking for.
Yeah, I think this is the reason why somebody like Matt Strahm on the Phillies has been on my radar for a while in certain formats, because I do think that he is somebody who pops in this way for multiple innings at a time. I think we saw it with Josh Winkowski when he was in the Red Sox bullpen was somebody who had really kind of popped.
Jeremiah Estrada had a run for a while. There was a really fun month about Reed Garrett, and then it's since kind of fallen apart. But that's another thing with these guys. My friend and podcast compatriot Michael Salfino would talk about these middle relievers like French fries. When they're hot, they're great, and when they go cold, you just have to move on. And that's
you cannot be precious with them and think, oh, but they were at this time. Like, you just got to move on to the next one and hope to find
the fresh batch of fries. You have to get the
fresh batch of fries when they're running hot. We're going to talk about custom leaderboards and some pitchers that you might be able to add. But before you do that, I want you to tune in and watch the toughest cycling race of the year. We're still going today through July 21st. The world's top cyclists compete for a chance to wear the yellow jacket in the Tour de France, which you can stream on Peacock. That's until through July 21st. So remember how grueling and long this race is. There's plenty of opportunity for you to check it out. So make sure you do that. The last thing I want to talk about, I want to just, celebrate the idea of custom leaderboards. I think being able to create leaderboards, I use them on Fangraphs. There are probably other places where you can use custom leaderboards where you can say, hey, these are stats I really find valuable, and I want to search by players who are doing well in these stats. What I love about the Fangraphs one is like, so I have an article coming out tomorrow where I look at players who you could trade for or pick up who are popping on my custom leaderboards. I did one for hitting, one for pitching. Set up the custom leaderboard. I download the leaderboard based on, whatever search parameters I put in. For me, I just did the last 30 days. Fangraphs has a site ability where you can toggle for league stats. So what is the league average of those stats as well? So like for hitters, what's the league average barrel rate over the last 30 days? What's the league average chase rate over the last 30 days? And then I take the spreadsheet that I've downloaded and I just delete I sort category by category, and I just delete players who are not at least league average in those stats. And what it does is usually give me a collection of players who are above average in every single stat that I like over the last X number of days. And I can see, hey, which of these guys is not actually being rostered because this guy is doing everything that I like at a level well above what everybody else in the league is doing. So if I'm correct in identifying stats that matter, those are guys that should be guys I want on my team. So there's some hitters, which you can read about in the article, but like we've talked about Jonathan India, who popped on that. Andy Pajes popped on that. Ben Rice popped on that. Some other pitchers like Michael Wacha popped on that, which again, you can read that full article on Thursday. I wanted to ask you about some of the guys who show up on that. DJ Herz is one who I fudged my way. So like I fudged my way to bring up DJ Herz because his Sierra is not great. So the underlying metrics don't fully believe, but the swinging strike rate has been really good. The strikeout rate has been good. He struck out 10 Mets last night. He debuted a little bit of a harder changeup that he was throwing for strikes, which is really important. I'm just curious your interest level in DJ Herz going forward, or is he a streamer for you? Would you put him on your roster and hold him but only start him in good matchups, or are you just not interested at all?
No, I think he's very streamable. I mean, go back to that Miami start, 13 strikeouts. You give him a pass for the Colorado turn. This is obviously a guy you would never trust in Colorado. Okay, the Padres got him in that start after that, and then he strikes out 10 Mets. Anytime you see double-digit, again, a Salfino rule was you see a double-digit strikeout performance, you have to react to it. I think maybe that number might be a little bit lower now that teams are so careful with the third time through the order and the pitch counts and all that. But this guy's he's got a 13 strikeout game and a 10 strikeout game in his last 4 turns. That, if nothing else, puts him near the top of the preferred streamer list. It's the kind of guy that you pick up, and then if he pitches well, you may think, okay, I'll hold on to him for a while. And it's kind of like a temp to perm situation. Yeah, I'm interested in Herz.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to check out the article that I wrote today, mixing it up over on NBC Sports. Herz's changeup last night against the Mets was 3 miles an hour faster than or harder, I guess I should say, than his changeup previously. It had less drop, less downward movement, so he actually commanded it better. It was in the strike zone more often, and considering he has command issues, that is really important for him because the fastball misses a lot of bats up in the zone, but he needs his secondaries to be thrown over the plate for strikes. It's only one start, so we don't want to overreact to it, but I was intrigued by the fact that this new changeup or this new version of the changeup looks like something he could control better and possibly help kind of like raise the floor for him being a little bit more of or a little bit less volatile of a pitcher. Reese Olson is another guy we've talked about a bunch. He popped in this article. He is somebody who like really struggled with the slider and changeup over the 3 starts in June where he got hit around a little bit and his fastball isn't good enough for him to survive that. But I assume, despite all that's gone wrong in Detroit, I assume we're both still in on Reese Olson, or am I alone on that island?
Oh, no, I'm definitely in. The walk strikeout rate clicks. And I guess Justin Steele wins the award as the most unlucky pitcher with respect to wins. He's getting an ERA in the low 3s. He's getting no wins. But Reese Olson is not far behind. Somehow he's 2-8 with a 3.32 ERA and a 1.20 whip. For a Tiger team that's been around 500 or a little bit below most of the season. It's not a great team, but this isn't one of those look out below teams either. The walk and strikeout rate tells you what you need to know. You will not want to pitch him against. Surprisingly, you would have benched him against Atlanta a few starts ago, whatever version of Atlanta we see these days, and he was great in that start. But I liked Reese Olson at the end of last year, and I still think he's an answer. He's. I know he didn't have a rotation spot, definitely his before the season, and he earned it and everything. It's always felt a little bit tenuous, but he could rattle off 6 or 7 wins in the second half. He's just been comically unlucky in all of the secondary metrics. He doesn't have jaw-dropping stuff. I get it. But all the things that you would look at for, is this pitcher going to give me quality innings? I think Reese Olson checks just about every box.
Yeah, I picked him up in a few places when he was dropped after those poor starts. I would encourage people to do the same, even if you maybe want to like hold off when he faces the Orioles or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like I think he is a really strong pitcher, and when those secondaries are over the plate with some consistency, he has a deep enough arsenal and strong enough secondaries to be a good pitcher. There
aren't that many lookout offenses in the American League either.
There aren't.
In that division, honestly, I mean, the Indians are pretty good. The Guardians are pretty good. The Twins are pretty good. But I mean, I could play Olson against anybody in his division. Certainly the White Sox. And you have teams like, we talk about Seattle, they're a good team. They have the worst strikeout rate in the majors. Nobody's even close to that. So we're not afraid of the Mariners. We're never afraid of Oakland. The Angels are a joke. Yeah, there's
the Astros right now without Kyle Tucker are fine, but not great offense.
I can live with it. I can live with it for sure. Yeah, there aren't that many. Yeah. The Orioles, the thing that the Orioles have that nobody else has is 1 to 9. They have a great lineup. Maybe it's like Cedric Mullins is like the one batter you take a rest on. The Yankees have an incredibly top-heavy lineup. Yeah, you Judge is a monster.
Bottom of it is.
Oh, God. They have like 3 or 4 guys working out. That's it.
Yeah. Bottom of that lineup is atrocious. And Verdugo and Volpe are in cold stretches right now. And so it's really just 2 guys propping up that
I'm
lineup.
Really curious to see what they do because they need they've been caught and passed by Baltimore, and we know how important it is to win your division given the current baseball playoff structure. This isn't the old Yankees where they just would annex. Maybe the Dodgers have become the Yankees now. It's like, oh, we need a shortstop. We'll just trade for Bo Bichette. It's like the Yankees used to be like that. Whoever was the most interesting player, you just assumed would end up on the Yankees. But they need this offense will not survive in October. People will pitch around or try to mitigate as long as Judge doesn't go Godzilla against you. I think they're going to get eliminated in the playoffs. They need a couple more hits. In fact, I don't even think one's enough. I think they need 2 more additions. There isn't a monster in the free agent market that I can see, but whatever. I mean, even just getting a plus offensive player to slot in the middle of their lineup would look really good right now.
Unless they think that Jason Dominguez will be back at some point in time, which is possible. But yeah, I agree. Multiple new bats in that lineup. I want to end with 2 pitchers. Kyle Gibson has also popped on this list. Kyle Gibson has a 22.1% strikeout rate. That is the second highest strikeout rate of his entire career. Gibson has leaned into the sweeper more this year. It is his most used pitch. The sweeper is missing bats. Kyle Gibson has a 3.88 ERA on the year with a 1.24 whip. He's in the middle of like his best season since the 2021 year where he was split between Texas and Philadelphia. None of the underlying metrics seem to support it. The Sierra over the last stretch has been pretty good, but I think this new sweeper heavy version of Kyle Gibson is worthy of being rostered in 15-team leagues and worthy of streaming in 12-team leagues, at least for the time being. But I'm curious if you have more caution.
No, I don't. He's probably on too many of my Yahoo teams because when he pitched really poorly against Atlanta last week, it left a mark. He had one of those good bad starts yesterday where he had 8 strikeouts. He picked up a win, but he did allow 4 earned runs. Unfortunately, you mentioned with Jordan Montgomery how he got the pitch in that best version of the St. Louis defense. With the year they won, I think 5 Gold Gloves in 2021. One of those seasons they had 5 Gold Glovers, which is just crazy. Now, by the metrics, the Cardinals are kind of an average defense, maybe even slightly below average. But I've always been a little bit of a Gibson sympathizer because he pounds his zone. He gets strikeouts by volume. He can usually give you enough depth to give you some win equity. And I'm going to stay with that. The Cardinals have kind of righted the ship. They're looking like they're going to be like an 85, 86 win team, probably sneak in the playoffs of a somewhat watered down National League. And Gibson will be one of their top 3 starters in the playoffs. I mean, probably he could be their number 2 after Sonny Gray. So I'm interested. Gibson, he's not a flashy guy. He's a back of your rotation player. Again, for some people, maybe a preferred streamer, but I think in any mixed league, 12 teams and up, he should definitely at least be rostered.
He's the type of name that people scroll past because they think they're boring. And, they've been around for a while and they're boring. And, a guy like DJ Herz is more exciting. But these are the guys that are sometimes worth adding.
For sure.
And they get short shrift. I want to just end by, there's another pitcher who popped on this custom leaderboard that I did, who I think is probably my favorite trade target right now. And it's Ryan Pepiot. Ryan Pepiot has a 4.40 ERA for the Rays. He does have a 1.09 WHIP. However, he has a 5.14 ERA and a 1.26 WHIP over his last 35 innings. So you may have a fantasy manager in your league who's like, I can't do this with Pepiot anymore. The Rays aren't able to fix him, blah, blah, blah. But Pepiot has a career high strikeout rate. Pepiot's fastball always profiled to be a fastball he should throw up in the zone. He has like 20 inches of induced vertical break. He is throwing it up in the zone all the time now. In the last start, he got so many whiffs on his fastball up in the zone. He's throwing the fastball up. He's throwing the slew of breaking balls, the slider, changeup, curveball, etc., down in the zone. The command of those slider, changeup, curveball, breaking balls has kind of been in and out over the last few starts, which is why he hasn't really kind of cruised. But I think if the command of those pitches steadies a little bit with the fact that he's now optimizing the use of his fastball, I think we could have a huge, like when last year people were saying, hey, Freddie Peralta is going to have a huge second half, and Freddie Peralta went on and had a huge second half. I think this year it's Ryan Pepiot. Like Ryan Pepiot could have a huge second half, and I'm trying to get him on my teams if I can.
Right, and the walk and strikeout rate will defend that. And when ERA and WHIP don't tell the same story, I like to trust the WHIP. I agree with this. Obviously it's his first year as a full-time starter, but I think he's an underrated asset right now and somebody I'd be looking to add. Or he's the type of player you can get thrown into a trade. You don't even have to make him the primary trade piece. I think he's a great player to focus on right now.
Boom. We are going to continue talking trades as the month goes on. We get closer to the trade deadline. You can always find Scott and I on Twitter. Maybe there's a suggestion. Maybe there's something you want us to cover on a show. Make sure to let us know. We're always trying to give you topics that you find that we think would be usable for you to help you make moves at whatever point in the league that, in the season that we're at. You can find me on Twitter at SamskiNYC, and Scott is at Scott_Pianowski. So let us know if there's something you want us to talk about. Download, rate, and review this podcast. It is really helpful to us, so we do appreciate that. Make sure to check out my article on coming out tomorrow on NBC Sports. Scott, do you have anything coming out that people should keep an eye on?
Just the regular stuff, baseball and football. And again, Twitter is a great place to keep in touch with my content. And I'll let you know, though we're a baseball show, fantasy football is open for business over at Yahoo. So definitely we support all sports over here at Yahoo Sports. So look into that. But don't worry, Yerrick and I aren't going anywhere. We know baseball's a grind, and we're going to keep grinding with you and get you in the money this season.
Yes, sir. We'll be here all the way through. So we'll check you out after the holiday weekend. Enjoy your holiday. Get some sun. Get some time at the grill. Get some relaxation, whatever you need. And we'll see you on Monday for another episode of the Rotoworld Baseball Show.